All right, welcome back to the How to Relate podcast. I'm here with Marty McGovern. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you so much for coming on. Um, it's been a minute.
It has
Yeah, yeah, officially MSW now.
officially and starting a new job next week. So a lot of good things in the works.
It's great. Yeah, welcome to the dark side. Yeah. So your career path, or yeah, which is going to be what we're talking about today, but it went from being more in the corporate world and then into
Mhm.
coaching and now into therapy land.
Yes, it's been quite the transition. It's been quite the journey as well.
So you know this from firsthand experience as well as professional experience.
hmm
How has that been for you?
Well, it's been really interesting because looking back, I was actually just chatting about this with someone yesterday where I found these old notebooks from when I was in high school and I took a psychology class and we had to, write down our dreams in a dream journal and analyze the dreams. And I just finished reading Jung's book on dreams as well. So it's been like a really funny full circle moment because that was my favorite class in high school, but it never clicked in my head that that could be a career. And I always had sort of like a business focus, went straight into marketing because I thought human behavior was fascinating. And so there has been this nice through line in everything that I've done. And I guess the way I sort of conceptualize it in my mind is I just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper into it. So understanding human behavior in terms of products and marketing, understanding human behavior in terms of education and coaching, and then understanding human behavior in terms of everything. Therapy world.
Yeah, yeah, the human behavior element, it definitely rings true for all of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it is interesting too because it seems like more workplaces are offering the human behavior element, whether it's EAPs or health and wellness, kind of additives um, as an attraction for people to come work for their company. So it's kind of interesting how it has evolved over the years.
It really is, and I also was looking back at one of my first jobs. I worked at a credit card company right out of school, and they actually had an on-site therapist, um, that, like, would ta if you were having a hard time, you would talk to them. I always just thought, because I hadn't been to therapy yet at the time, I always just thought that that was a place where people went and took naps, when they were, like, stressed out or something, and I was like, "I don't trust someone in the company to talk to about these problems, they're gonna probably tell HR or something," so I never engaged in, like, the therapy stuff until, like, my late 20s when I got my own therapist, but, yeah, it's so funny because it's like that I probably had amazing perks first job and just did not even, like, fully understand the full scope of the perks that I had, and then since then, I've, worked at EAPs and worked with a bunch of different, things like that, and there are a lot more services out there, and then there's also an interesting shift happening in the types of services with BetterHelp and Ginger and all these different companies that are sort of like privatized versions of EAPs, or I'm sure EAPs are private as well, but um, yeah, like more chat-based therapies or more like technology-based, AI-based even, which is scary. So yeah,
Mhm.
there's a lot of interesting supports and services out there. It'll be fascinating to see how they evolve over the next decade.
It'll be very interesting to see how it all evolves. I was at Esther Perel's Mating in the Meta Crisis event
Oh, cool.
in New York. Yeah, it was like a 2-day event. And someone came out to me who was a futurist, which is such a fascinating job title to
Oh,
have.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, what is it that you do? Do you have a
I've met a
crystal
handful of
ball?
futurists in my day.
I'm like, this feels like a little like when, which I hate to put this out there, but it sounds like when someone says that they're a life coach, I'm like, did you just
Mhm.
nail life? Are you just getting a 10 out of 10 all aspects of life that you can do this? So she talked to me and a friend I was there with, and she was trying to essentially pitch us that as therapists can have an AI bot that we train as ourselves to then be able to talk with clients. And when
Yep.
we kind of pushed back about the liability around that of what if this bot says something that we would never say or never recommend, or that there's a HIPAA liability issue, like all of these things, she just kept trying to pitch us like we are VCs. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Man, we are not your audience for this. Like we are not really for how this is going to go because one, I don't think bots are going to be able to replace human therapists. But the other aspect is that even having these things as an additive, I don't necessarily know what benefit it really has.
Well, it's an interesting thing because, as therapists, you and I would push back on that. However, there is going to be a secondary market, whether it's approved by therapists or not approved by therapists, where that exists and that's being used. I was actually just texting with a friend recently, and they were asking me some questions. They're in couples therapy, and they were like trying to figure out some things, and I gave them an answer, and they're like, "Wow, I'm really glad I asked you because I was about to go to ChatGPT for that." And you know, I'm not saying that the answer from ChatGPT would have been bad. I have no idea. I didn't type it in, but I mean, I'm definitely sure I gave a very nuanced answer to that person that was well thought through and applicable to their personality because I've known them for many years. And so it is one of those things where, like, regardless of how therapists feel about it, the thing about tech, because I've worked in tech for many, many years, is that they don't care. They're going to build it and they'll deal with the legal ramifications later, if there even are any that come after them. Like, if you look at the whole crypto space and all the scams and all the things that are going on there, well, that's all great. That's where there's huge scams, and there's YouTube channels that break down the scams and tell you why all these meme coins are bad and everything like that. But then the government agency that investigates crypto just got disbanded. So I guess anyone's allowed to do it now, and there's no regulations around it. So, these are the things where it's like you and I, as practitioners, I think we're safe because even in the EAP stuff that I've done, people want to be in person. We've been like, that's been one of the hardest things about placing people with therapists is that everyone is asking for in-person therapy, and so many therapists moved online during the pandemic. Um, and so I do think that the AI thing will exist. It'll be its own thing because they'll just have to put a little thing that says, this is not actually approved therapy. This is just suggested, and they'll get away with it legally. And I think a lot of people will start there, and maybe it'll even be like a gateway drug to real therapy. That's my like idealistic hope. But we're seeing even crazier things than that with like AI girlfriends and boyfriends and stuff like that. And I think that's way worse. But who knows what the world of AI is out there. If there's a buck to be made, people will be trying to make it.
For sure. The hope kind of is that for every extreme trend, there's a counter trend. So, I mean, the past 5 years, especially, everyone's moved online, and I think that at least as far as I'm hearing, especially as you mentioned, people wanting more in-person therapy. That now the trend is we've been online for so long, we're fatigued of doing everything virtually. Where are the in-person spaces? So even things like dating apps have decreased in revenue. Meanwhile, Eventbrite singles groups have gone up because people are burned out on doing everything virtually and want to be more in person. It seems like that trend is also happening for therapy, that people are getting burned out from having another Zoom meeting because they're doing it all day in their job. And they're like, I just want to see a real person.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, even personally, anytime I've done in person, I've done virtual, and then right now my therapy is in person. But every time we do a virtual session, I'm always like, it just doesn't feel the same. It just doesn't. I feel like I'm in a work meeting, not like I'm in a therapy session. And even with our podcast, like if you and I were in person, we'd probably have had coffee before this and had a lot more time to get comfortable and chat before hopping right in, which, it's awesome that we're able to do this because we're not in the same city, but there are, trade-offs with everything. And so, the virtual therapy is great because it gives more access, but at the same time, it's not there are differences in how things are experienced.
yes. Something that was talked about at the conference is the rise in virtual therapy. And basically, Esther scolded everyone who was just doing online therapy and said, I'm really pushing you to do more in person work and to get more group settings too,
Yeah.
because that's another. way to start to create more of a community. But you're absolutely right that the feel of it is not the same. It does feel more business-like in a sense that whenever I have a virtual session, people get right down to business. The niceties aren't as likely to happen. It feels way more like, "Hey, this is what I'm here to talk about. There's an agenda."
Mhm.
Versus when it is in person, there's a little bit more of a warm up, there's a little bit more depth, and then there is this, like, transition into the end that feels a little bit more natural.
Yeah, and as cute as cats and dogs are when they're crawling in front of the camera and things like that, it definitely is distracting.
For sure, for sure. I've had that happen a couple of times, and it's like, oh, the dog needs to be let in or out or whatever it is. Also, there's like Zoom things that where the balloons just randomly pop up, and it's always at the worst
Oh,
time. It's the worst.
I legitimately had someone, like, crying on a coaching call because they were rejected from something, and I, like, made a hand movement, and it put celebration all over the screen, and I was like, "Tech companies drive me crazy. They only think this is being used in this very narrow thing that they use for their tech company, where everything is, like, hyper positive celebration no matter what's going on." And it's like, imagine if the celebration went off like while you were being laid off on a Zoom call. Like
Oh my
I
god.
would I would punch the screen. I would be so upset.
For sure. It reminds me of that, movie, what was it, Up in the Air with George Clooney?
Mm.
Um, where they were started to try to move everything to be online, where then you're firing people, like, via a Zoom call, and it just goes horrendously bad, and they're like, "The reason why we do this in person is because there is a level of empathy." Yes, you hire somebody to essentially do the dirty work and letting people go, but when it's online, so much gets mistranslated.
Well, and that was a prescient movie because it is all done on Zoom now. And it's done in, like, pre-recorded Zooms now, like, you can't even interact, and it's done in group Zooms now, like, a pre-recorded group Zoom that goes out to everyone in the company, and your email is turned off before you like, while you're on the call. Like, there's a real, depersonalization of the workforce, which and this becomes one of those things that I struggle with because as much as I'm an advocate of flexibility and remote work and hybrid work and being able to, I've been a remote worker for many, many years. It's one of the things that I like sought out early in my career. However, I can't deny the problems that that has created in my career, which is a lack of connection with coworkers, a lack of mobility in certain jobs, my own lack of connection to the jobs that I have and feeling more like transactional in the way that I interact. Now, does that mean I want every company to make everyone go back in person because they want to justify their rent? No, not necessarily. But it is one of those things where I'm like the hybrid model of like, I have friends who are incredible extroverts and the fact that they're remote is really bad for them mentally and for the productivity of their work as well. Because, while an introvert might be able to sit at home all week and just quietly work on their things, an extrovert might legitimately just be bouncing off the walls.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, because when people essentially gravitate toward company culture and everything's virtual, it's kind of like, well, what culture? This job can be done online and have meetings via Zoom. It's just with different boxes where the cameras are also off. So
Hmm.
it really is just there is a disconnection there.
Yeah. And every time I end up going like in one job I was completely remote. They were in California, I was in Chicago. And every time I'd go down to visit the offices, like I'd come back feeling so much more renewed, so much more connected. Even just going for a walk with my boss on the coast was a better conversation than we'd had in a year and a half of like online meetings. So that kind of stuff I think really does make a difference. And I think this kind of plays into the isolation that we're seeing in our world and the individualization and like the traps of getting sucked into different online what word can we use for the rabbit holes people go down that are not healthy. But it is one of those things where, kind of going to the idea of what we're talking about here of how do we find is there such a thing as a dream job? And what are the different elements that can make jobs good, bad, or ugly, you know?
Yeah, as you were talking, I'm like, too much time alone, people start to get a little weird. I mean, I know I do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
Sometimes me, myself, and I get a little sick of each other. So yeah,
Mhm.
I mean that does happen.
Well, because we don't exist without other people. Like the worst thing you could do to someone is put them in, solitary confinement. That's like the worst punishment that you could put someone through. And in a way, let's say you're a single person working remotely, and let's say you're a coder. Most of your time is spent in solitary confinement in a much less intense way, but it is one of those things where if there's a big difference between someone working remotely with a family, someone working remotely with a pet, someone working remotely on their own, and the spectrum is wide.
Sure. Yeah, it's the parts of freedom that we've craved so much and wanted so much that have their downsides. And their
Mhm.
downsides are that we are then more disconnected than we ever have been before. So it is kind of playing to the both sides of it. How do you have a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, and have a sense of freedom?
Yeah, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, right? So it's like, obviously, all of us want to be able to just roll out of bed in our pajamas and work. That would be amazing, right? But there is also something to be said about putting on pants and having to deal with people. And so, I remember after the pandemic, I was like, oh, none of my pants fit because I've been wearing sweatpants for like that kind of thing is just like, huh, I didn't even realize like that my body was falling apart over the last year or so, as I was kind of just not out in the world, not interacting with people, not having to like I think I maybe own one suit now and it probably doesn't fit. Like it's like there just haven't been reasons to wear a suit in a very long time. And some of these things are just kind of goofy, but other times it's like, they're being able to be around people that challenge you, let's say, let's just use the word challenge, being around people that challenge you and not being able to run away from it's kind of exposure therapy, right? Like if you never are dealing with other people, if you can always just deal with them through a chat, or God forbid, you AI yourself and the chatbot deals with everyone for you, you will lose those skills and you will lose that ability to tolerate discomfort and that ability to do those things. And so I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I'd love to look into studies around like how much does like neuroticism or OCD or different things increase the more time we spend alone versus around people.
Yeah, because the neuroticism unfortunately thrives in those kinds of conditions of isolation because
Mhm.
it is a very self-focused and self-oriented way of being. There is a rigidity that comes with this, and anything that creates friction around that rigidity is intolerable. So then if you're dealing with a work environment or a work conflict in any sort of way, this skill isn't built to where it has tolerance. It just becomes more and more of a detriment to having that connection because that rigidity is just deepening.
Yeah. Like early in my career, I would obsess about the emails that I sent out to people. I would spend hours trying to write the perfect email, and it was unhealthy. It was like way too much anxiety. I needed to get, support. Um, but I look back at that and I'm like, if AI just wrote every email for me, I never would have had to confront that anxiety, had to confront those fears, had to get good at writing emails to the point where now I can send an email to anyone, stranger, anyone, and feel pretty confident that I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm supposed to say and I know how social interactions work online. Whereas, like, obviously, I wish I had less discomfort back then. But because I went through that discomfort, I have zero discomfort now. And when I work with people as a career coach, so much of it is just getting them comfortable with the process. I have a client who really wants to have scripts. They want to have a script for everything. And I gave them a bunch of scripts to get us started. But at a certain point, you can't have a script for everything because these are human interactions, and every person is a different position in the company or a different level of connected to you or not connected with you, or is more important or less important towards your career goals, or is someone that you click with or don't click with, or they're introvert and you're whatever. Like, there's no way to have a script for every single situation. We're not salespeople selling the same product over and over again for years, right? So one of the things that I've had to challenge this client on is like, you have the scripts, it's not just having the scripts, it's understanding why they're written this way and then being able to improvise as you go. And I think so much of that is true of everything in your career. It's like, what is the right job for me? What is the thing I should be doing? And the answer is, it can't anything. Like, you just need to be doing something and learning from that and adapting and evolving and adapting and evolving and getting better and moving in the right direction slowly over time. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they think about a dream job or something, they think about it as a destination that once I get there, I'm done. Same as like, oh, once I'm married, I'm done, or once I have kids, I'm done, or whatever the thing might be. It's like, no, those are the beginnings. That's just getting to the starting line for you to then do the rest of the 30, 40-year career or whatever it might be.
Mhm. What would you say to someone who would say, okay, but if I don't have to go through the discomfort of sending my own email and where I can just ask a chatbot or GPT to essentially respond to all my emails because I can just now copy paste and it'll spit back down an answer for me. So it takes off the discomfort of having that responsibility. What would you say to someone who's like, why should I go through that discomfort though?
Well, I'll 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 say, because AI is not going to go anywhere. So it's not like you're using AI and then in 10 years you won't be allowed to use it anymore. It's not like I use a calculator every day for my homework and then I'm not allowed to use a calculator on the test. We always have a calculator. We always have Excel. So in some respects, you don't have to learn it. Um, so what I would say to that person is, what would be the benefit to you of learning that? And in my mind, the benefit is being able to handle distress, being able to handle anxiety, being able to show yourself you're capable of doing certain things. You might not need to do that through emails. Maybe you outsource emails for your whole career and you never have to deal with that. That's fine. But then how are you going to learn that skill? It's probably going to be in relationships, right? Because what you learn in career communications, although not exactly applicable, is giving you stress tolerance that you can then apply to friendships, to relationships, to family, to other things, to parenting, let's say. Like, let's say you never learn how to deal with communications. You never actually learn what makes you a good communicator and what works well and doesn't work well. And then you have kids and you suddenly have no idea how to handle the tension of those communications. Well, I guess now you have to learn it, right? And so I never tell people they have to do anything. It's up to you whether you want to do anything. Uh, and if this is a place you want to practice those skills, let's practice them so that you can level up your skill base. And then when harder things happen in 10, 15, 20 years, you're able to handle those things with ease rather than the first time you're ever practicing the skill is in like a life or death situation, or, a make or break situation. I always say, like, people will get an interview and they're like, well, I don't know if I really want to work there. And I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is maybe I shouldn't go on the interview. And I go, so you want your first interview to be with your dream job? Is that what you're saying to me? You don't want to practice at all in the interviews prior to your dream job? And I mean, that is like the communications that we do during an email are ways to practice that tolerance level so that when we get to the interview, we're much better communicators, right? And so it all builds on itself. And yeah, it's like I remember when I was in college, I was really interested in design. I was an art and design minor, and we would sit in class and learn about Photoshop and Illustrator and all these different programs and how to like utilize the different tools to do certain things. And it was like very, very early, like masking and cloning tools and different things like that. And I remember using Wix.com and being like, oh, why would I learn how to code a website if I can just use Wix.com? And then I never learned how to code a website. And then I've always been restricted in my ability to build things to whatever the tools are that Wix or Squarespace or whatever these sites have. Now, for me personally, that's fine. But I never learned those skills. And if you ask me to like create a highly customized website, I can't do it. Now, granted, that's not my career, but if I did want to go into design, that's a real crutch that I have to lean on. I can only do, these certain types of websites. Um, and like for me, I guess early on, I was like, I sort of foresaw Canva being a thing. And like if Photoshop exists, can't like I didn't know obviously that Canva was going to be a thing, but I'm like, they're just going to make this easier and easier for people to use. So I'm just not going to learn these skills because that was a art minor. It wasn't my major. I was like, I'm just not going to learn these skills and the technology will catch up to me. Um, and that's fine because my goals never exceeded the technology I had access to. But if your goals exceed the technology, then you're really limiting yourself by not learning those things. Because I wanted to learn more like human interaction, social interaction, psychology, and all that kind of stuff. And I went deep, deep, deep into that. And then my design skills were always kind of novice, but that was fine because I only make novice things with my design skills. And there's times where I wish I went a little deeper, but at the same time, it's like I've gone incredibly deep in these other areas that I'm far more interested in and actually are applicable to my career.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it's essentially putting in the repetitions for other relational events. So every email that someone sends is essentially like it's like earning your reps, or it's like these are the scrimmages before the Super Bowl. So that for every time you're going to have to deal with the uncertainty or disappointment or some sort of a human emotion potentially from the other side. And it's being able to handle that anxiety within oneself. And then the other part is it sounds like the level of discernment of knowing which skills you want to go in deep on and which skills you're okay with kind of going like, I can be novice at this and that be okay
Yeah.
because I'm going in deep in these other areas.
Yeah. And I would even say I went to an extreme where I was like, I'm going to go into interviews with zero prep, not even reading the job description and see how well I can do with no information in my head. Like I was a career coach. So it's like I wanted to like become an expert at all of these networking and communication skills. And early on I would have like panic attacks in job interviews. So like I literally would have panic attacks at networking meetings and like not know what to do. And so for me, I was like, I need to get rid of this panic disorder that I have. And the way I knew how to do it at the time was, I guess, a very like Wild West exposure therapy. But now it's much more controlled and much more focused. But that's not what everyone needs to do. Like I wouldn't give someone who's like a web developer the task of like doing what I did as a marketer back in the day. I wouldn't tell a doctor to act like a marketer, let's say. There's appropriate levels, and it's like if you can do some combination of leveraging AI and pushing yourself slightly, like maybe just a little out of your comfort zone, or maybe you're good at communications and you need to focus on something else. Like I never learned how to do math because I always had a calculator or Excel. So, if you ask me to do math in my head, it's not happening. Um, but you know, it's never really created an issue in my life because I can use the basics of Excel and I can use the things that I need to use. And so I don't think these tools are bad and I don't think they should be avoided, but I do think it's like, what is the right thing that you need to get to where you're trying to go?
Yeah. The right thing you need to get where you're trying to go. Yeah. And I think that is that experience, is that knowing how does one start to even explore that?
Well, the question of where am I trying to go is probably the biggest question to figure out. This is also an area that I've evolved on because I came from the world of dream jobs. Like I thought that was like everyone needs to have their dream job, and I don't believe that anymore. Um, I actually don't even really believe in dream jobs because jobs are in so much flux that a dream job could be a dream job because you have a great manager, but then they leave the company, or a dream job could be a dream job for 3 years, but then like the organization pivots, or a dream job could be a dream job until you get promoted. And then suddenly you're not doing the tactical thing, you're managing people. And now it's not quite what you're good at, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, there's nothing static. Everything is always moving. And so sitting down and taking an assessment of what am I good at and what comes naturally to me, and doubling down on those skills and seeing where they can take you is far more important than like, I mean, it's that strengths finders thing, right? Like, don't waste time trying to get good at something that you'll never be better than even the worst good person at that. It's a weird way to say that, but like, I'm never going to do math as well as someone who likes math. So it'd be kind of a real waste of time for me to spend years studying math just to be as good as someone who's like in high school.
Right. That's how I took math too. Yeah, that so essentially it's having the flexibility around this too. It's knowing what you want and the direction you want to go in, with the understanding and the caveat that it's always subject to change.
And also, your career is not everything. Like, what are the reasons that you're doing your career? If you're someone who needs to feel like your career brings them purpose, and like that's not going away and it is stuck with you forever, then you better find yourself a purposeful career. But not everyone feels that way. So to say everyone should have their dream job is a ridiculous statement. When a dream job might be, this job pays me enough money to be able to support my family, and that is the dream. So that would be a dream job, right? I don't like the job, but it pays my bills, and that is me fulfilling my dream.
Yeah, because something that we had on deck for today is the method of the dream job, which I think about how, again, society has really narrowed in, and it's become that I find my purpose in work and I find the sense of a soulmate in romance. So it's become that there's these two endeavors that we strive so hard for that third places have really lost their spaces. It's like, why bother doing a hobby if you're not going to be the best? Why bother
Mhm.
even trying to just have mediocre friendships if they're not meeting my needs, or anything that is not of the highest of standard or caliber, then feels like, well, the why bothers start to kind of come into play. But
Yeah.
because of that, then it's like, I need the dream job, I need the dream relationship. But I think the dream job, especially, it's like, yeah, times change, people change, companies change. We've been seeing that, especially recently.
Well, I had a client whose dream job was to work for her manager. He went to Disney and she loved working for that manager. So she went to Disney to follow him, and then he retired the next year. And then she's doesn't actually care about Disney, didn't even like the rest of the team or the work she was doing. She just wanted to work for that person. And she's like, well, that dream job changed pretty quick. What do I do now? And it's like, the one thing that I always found funny in my coaching work is I'll be on the phone with someone who's like, I desperately want to work at Google. That's my dream place. I just wish I could get a job at Google. And then the next call I'm on is someone working at Google going, I hate this place. I need to get out of here. I thought this was going to be great, and it's not what I thought it was going to be. And like, I think so much of our life is sort of driven by this thought of what we would like, and then when we get there, it never really lives up to it. Versus like, what do I actually like today, and how do I maximize that? Like, the reality of today, obviously there's like a balance there because you have to be thinking about the future, but it is sort of a tough thing to do where it's like, I'll talk to people and they're like, oh, I just wish I could be X. And then I actually have them go talk to 5 people who do that, and they're like, "That sounds awful. I don't wanna do that." But it's like online, we're being sold this, perfect version of every single job that does like, when I switched to becoming a therapist, I talked to, dozens of people, and everyone is like, I enjoy it, but boy, am I burnt out. And so going into this, I'm like, I'm going to enjoy it, and boy, I'm going to be burnt out. Like, I have a very realistic expectation of what is to come. Whereas like when I went into marketing, I thought I was going to be like working on the most amazing creative campaigns, and like when that's like 1% of the advertisements that are created. And so like I think it is maybe a lot of what we can talk about here is expectations. Like how do you manage expectations when you're looking at career, life, relationships, etc.?
Yeah, because it is understanding what are the pain points that I'm willing to tolerate to be in this. Am I willing to tolerate the burnout for the enjoyment of the parts of the job that I'm going to have right in the beginning or in this moment?
Yeah. Well, for me, like when I was in marketing and advertising, I was incredibly burnt out and I didn't like the work. Like I was working on Christmas. So like I'm like, if I'm gonna be burnt out regardless, because that's the type I'm just drawn to things that burn people out, I might as well be burnt out towards like a better cause than the Color of True Values website. Like I'm updating True Values website on Christmas. This is a ridiculous thing that I'm doing versus like let's say in a year I have to like answer a phone call on Christmas because someone's in crisis. At least it's like worthwhile for me to step away, in my own view of my own life and my own world. Obviously, that's not what everyone should be doing. I always hate when people go to career coaches and then they leave going, I should be a career coach. And I'm like, no, you should. He's like, this isn't an MLM scam. you like anyone, like everyone who goes to a life coach is like, I should be a life coach. It's like, no, that's not. You should go
That
to a
wasn't the
life
point.
coach to figure out what you are, not to become what they are. I always found that to be really funny.
Well, I think that's when you know really what someone's maybe true intentions are when they're working with somebody. Because if someone
Mhm.
can convince them they should be that person, it's like you found a guru, not a coach.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. It's
Well,
so
wait,
it.
really quick to that
Go
point.
ahead.
I
Yeah.
I've had so many clients come to me and they're like, I want to be a career coach. And I'm like, why? I think I fell into this. Like I don't like I was in marketing and then I just started like leading workshops and running networking events and doing all these things. Then people started hiring me as a coach and then I got a contract and then that led to a job and it just sort of happened because I was good at it. Whereas some people are like they see Tony Robbins and they're like, I want to be a coach. And I'm like, that guy's not a coach. That's a con artist. Like that's like, and I'm not gonna. Obviously, I'm being over the top here. I obviously he's helped people, whatever, blah 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 blah.
Sure.
But it's like that's a salesperson, not a coach. Like they're like, look at what he actually does, the way he upsells packages, how much he charges for things, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not even saying don't go to the events if you enjoy going to the events. But if you leave that thinking I should be Tony Robbins, you're not quite getting the right message.
Mm-mm. No, because it looks glamorous.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say the difference is between coaching and therapy?
Well, first of all, therapists have credentials. Um, so I'm much more of a fan of that. I never got a coaching certification, and I was hired as a coach during the big like boot camp boom that happened in Chicago, and I was trained by 12 different organizations on how to be a coach. So I feel personally that I've gotten a great education in how to be a good career coach. But whenever someone would say, like, do you have any credentials? I'm very clear. I don't have any coaching credentials. I've worked with these people and that's all I've done. And if you are looking for credentials, don't talk to like we shouldn't work together. Um, but one of the reasons I went back to school to get a MSW and become a therapist was because if I'm going to get a credential, I want to get a credential that I think is valuable. And I just like even a coaching credential, you do a 3 to 6 week seminar or something like that, and now you're a certified coach. I'm not saying there's no value in that because obviously you need to learn how to write resumes, you need to learn how to like coach people on how to network and all these different things. I just feel like where I was kind of seeing things is I get a little bit conflicted on this because I
Mhm.
have like complex opinions on it. On the one hand, I get really grossed out by a lot of like life coaching and things like that. On the other hand, I'm like, if it's helping people, it's helping people, and I don't want to get in the way. So I'm not here to tell people what is or isn't good. I'm not here to tell people like who you should or shouldn't work with. Like if you love tarot cards and you want to go see someone who's going to do that, more power to you. I took the MBTI. It's not scientific, but I thought it was interesting, right? So I'm not like I am poo-pooing things, but I'm also like, do whatever you want. Like this is a weird world we live in. So I tend to find that the reasons I'm drawn towards being a therapist is because there just is a little bit more in terms of like barriers to entry, um, and like we do sign a document that says like you have to live up to these standards or you lose your license. So that to me is like protecting the client. Like social workers can't like, you know, go out with their clients. That's a good thing. Like that's a great rule. That should be across the board. But life coaches, they can do whatever the heck they want. They can put you in a sauna for 7 hours and have you overheat and then like have you do ayahuasca and like who knows what else. And again, I'm not against saunas or ayahuasca. I'm just there's no regulations versus lots of regulations. And again, I went early in my career. I bought an online course that was like by some random dude who was teaching things, and I enjoyed it and I learned a lot from it. So I'm not even against the unvalidated coaches. What I am just sort of personally all about is like, how do you make sure you're protecting the client? And one of the things that I was always sort of focused on in my own coaching, because I actually had people say like, can you be a life coach to me instead of a career coach? And I was like, you really want that? Like my life, I don't, it's like all that put together and you're 20 years older than me. So like, why do you want me to be your life coach? And, we talked about it and I was like, well, I don't think I'm qualified to talk to you about these things. I can connect you with people who are, and I can talk about this portion of it that is related to like life and career and how those things interact with each other. But I don't know. I always found like I find coaches sometimes overstep those boundaries a little bit too much. And, therapists overstep boundaries all the time too. So I'm not here to, hate on any one group, but I would say let's take it out of my opinions and my inner inner workings. I think practically coaches are much more focused on like achieving an outcome and therapists are much more focused on like being okay with what's happening, and like dealing with life as it is rather than like changing yourself into someone else necessarily. Whereas coaching can sometimes be more like you suck and you need to fix this. Therapy is like you're okay, and because you're okay, we can start to work on these things. So if you go to a lot of what is popular on the internet, because extreme opinions reign supreme, coaches are a little bit more. I always felt that they were a little bit more like, wake your ass up, you suck. And that's why I called my company career therapy, because I'm like, you're fine. Let's build on a good foundation rather than like a self-deprecating foundation. But yeah, a long answer to that question, but I could probably talk about it more.
For sure. I think you and I share a lot of similar outlooks on this. Because there was this old trope, and I think it still goes around on the internet, where it's like coaching focuses on the here and now and what you should do, and therapy focuses on the past. And I'm like, well, that's not really it.
It's not
Like that's like,
really accurate. Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, that's way oversimplified. Because yeah, the regulations do keep people safe. And again, there are bad actors everywhere, but regulations are there. And how you mentioned the halo effect of when someone is coming to you for career coaching and then they say, hey, will you life coach me too? I have all these other issues going on in my marriage and my finances and my closet's a mess. But it becomes like the relationship's built. There's like a bit of a halo effect of like, if you're so knowledgeable in this area, it must mean that you're knowledgeable in all these areas.
Mm.
I think anyone who is good is going to outsource, is going to say, I know where my limitations are, and this is where I move you on to these other resources or other people to say, hey, not my expertise, but this might be.
Absolutely. When I had my first company after advertising, after my advertising job, I remember I had a business partner and we were teaching people how to like pitch themselves, brand themselves, because that's what we were experts in. He worked in sales, I worked in marketing. We were very good at that. We could talk to someone for 10 minutes, give them a pitch that they could go and like sell their product or sell themselves for a job or whatever it might be. And I remember we finished we built this course and we launched it and we finished it. And a few months later, my business partner says to me, we should do a relationship course next. And I'm like, we're both single. What are you talking about? I don't know anything. I'm like, I'm 24. I don't know anything about that. And we're both single. I think we should not do that. And it was just like a really funny moment. We both had a good laugh about it because the halo effect, like a lot of times when people start teaching, they're like, oh, well, because I was able to do that, I can do all these other things. I can talk about finance. I can talk about relationships. I can talk about this. It's like it took you 15 years to become an expert in the first thing. And now you think in 2 months you can become an expert in the second thing. And, you know, that's just sort of the way of self-help. It's like, I'm a badass. And then all of a sudden there's like 13 books of I'm a badass. But which again, I'm not even hating on that. Like self-help is what it is. We all know what it is. And I was very much engaged in it for many years. And then I think at a certain point you put down the self-help and you just be yourself. And that's when life can really start to be fun.
Yeah, well, kind of circling back to what we talked about before of dealing with the uncertainty. Self-help oftentimes is like, I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. I want answers on how to be or how to deal with this thing. And a lot of times it is relational, whether it's a work email or what to say to a family member, how to set boundaries, whatever it might be. But that it is coming from a place of, I'm not good enough in this area and I need someone to tell me how to be good.
Yeah. Well, and these tools might be helpful too. Like I hate writing blog posts. I tried for years to like be a blogger before the YouTube stuff. And if I had AI back then, I could have probably AI'd my blog posts and improved my SEO and it all would have been fine because blogging kind of isn't a thing anymore. Um, but what I ended up having to do, because every time I would try and write a blog post, I'd like overthink it for months and never end up writing anything or like write way too much or like try and put too much into it or whatever it might be. I ended up finding like, well, what am I good at? I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at having conversations. And that led to having a podcast for a few years, which is how you and I met. And so like these are because I was bad at something and there was no other way for me to do it. I guess I could have hired someone else to write it, but I didn't have any money at the time. And so like, but it forced me to find the things I was good at. And, I even tried to do a podcast that was just me, just by myself. And that was awful because I'm just like, who am I talking to? What is this? Where it's like, oh, I'm good at conversations. Let's make it about that. And so, again, at the end of the day, do all the self-help, try all the things, be bad at a bunch of stuff, and then stop doing what you're bad at and you'll find what you're good at. And that where I think things really start to build.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's a book, have not read it. It's way too long, I think. It's called Range. It's called Range. And it essentially talks about why we need to be more generalist and then specialize, but that there's
Hmm.
this push for specializing, or there's this push for knowing what you're good at and going all in. But to have explored a bunch of different skills is the only way to really do that. And I think
Yeah.
what even like research around what teenagers and people who are in their early 20s are going through right now is this level of anxiety because they feel like that they have to be perfect or so good at whatever it is that they touch. And it's anxiety ridden if they're not. Or it's like if I'm not good at this thing or I'm not good at school or I'm getting C's instead of A's, it's like catastrophic. As opposed to it being this is learning and this is just part of the process built into life.
Yes. I like that you phrase it as this is learning and it doesn't ever stop. And so like one of the things as I've been going through my MSW program, I just graduated last week. As I've been going through the program, I was like, I spent a lot of time stressing out about like, what am I going to do after graduation? Because I didn't have an answer, right? And when you don't have an answer, you're stressing. And I was years away from an answer. So I was just like sitting and ruminating and going nuts. And I have this real interest in OCD, and I was like, maybe I'll work with OCD, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And I went really far down these like rabbit holes where I even like design brands and all sorts of different things. 'Cause that's what my brain does when it's stressed. And at a certain point, it's so funny because like now that I have a job that I'm starting next week, I'm going to be working with youth, couples, and adult individuals. And if you had asked me 2 years ago, who do I want to work with? I was like, oh, this very specific population doing this very specific type of work. And the closer I got to graduation, the more I realized like, I haven't worked with couples yet. I haven't worked with kids one-on-one yet. I have worked with lots of adult individuals, so I know I'm good at that piece of it, but I don't know if I'm good at the other two things until I do them for a little bit. And so for the next 2 years, I'm going to do everything and see if I learn something new about myself that I didn't know before. If I always just stay in my comfort zone and only work with adult individuals, then I'll be, 60 years old and I'll only have had that experience. But if I work with couples for 2 years, I might find I'm really good at it. And the closer I get to doing it, I'm like, I actually might be really good at it. Based on like the interactions I've been having and the work I did in my internships and things like that. And so, it all remains to be seen, but that is the curiosity that keeps me going versus like pigeonholing myself into like one thing and never being able to do anything else.
And I think what's so great about being therapists is that we can evolve into different spaces. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, similarly worked with families because I wanted to get the range, adults, couples, kids, all of it, and then addiction, and then now back to more of the couples and relational work. But it is nice to be able to go with like maybe that changes and evolves.
Yeah.
And maybe you find new interests or ways that you can like be flexible later down the line.
And that's scary, but it's also fun. And so it's like it depends on how we look at it. Cause, a year and a half ago I was terrified, but this week I'm just excited. And in a year and a half I'll be burnt out. And like it's all part of it. And I think a lot of times we think things are going wrong when we're just in the dip of the process. Um, I've had a lot of people who come to me thinking that they need to quit their job or, you know, any number of things that they think they need to do when they sign up for career coaching. And we find out that it's actually something totally different they need to do. Right. So a funny example of this is back when I was in marketing consulting, I had this law firm that I was working with, and they were like, "We need a new email." Or sorry, no, we need a new website. We need a brand new website. Blah blah blah. And we like spent. We were getting coffee and we were talking about this website, and I was like, "Why do you need a new website?" And they were like, "Because we need more customers." And I was like, "How many customers come through your website right now?" They're like, "None." And that's why we need a new website. And I was like, well, where do your customers come from? And they're like, well, we get a lot of customers through our email. And I was like, have you optimized your email yet? And they go, what? No, we haven't optimized that. I'm like, well, let's focus on optimizing your email, maximizing the customers there, and then funneling that to the website if we need to. Because they didn't need tons more customers. They just need a handful. And so that to me is applicable to everything. It's like I need a new resume. I need a new job. I need a new whatever. And it's like, maybe we just need to be focused on like this part of it or that part of it or improving something outside of work. A lot of times, if you just join like a volunteer organization outside of work and put less pressure on your work to be everything, then you have a more balanced, it's like diversifying your investments, diversify your sources of joy so that you don't if your job is bad this week, it doesn't ruin everything else.
So when should someone start looking for a new job? Like, when is it too good to leave, too bad to say kind of thing? So, what would you say to someone if they're like, I might be looking for a new job?
Low key, always be looking for a job. Um, the question is, what's the intensity? So always be ready, always be networking. And what I mean by that is like right before this call, I had a quick 20-minute chat with someone who is starting their own practice and they work on things that I think are interesting. And who knows, maybe 6 years, 10 years from now, we collaborate on something. Um, I'm not putting any pressure on that. It may never happen, but it's the curiosity to seek out and connect with people that I think are doing interesting things that keeps it's not technically job searching, but like low key in the background, it sort of is. Um, and so, you know, it never hurts to have your resume just up to date, you know? Oh, I worked on a new project. Let's add it to the resume. It never hurts to like take an interview here and there. If you reach out, if you see something and you apply to it, or if someone reaches out to you and talks to you, like you don't have to be job searching 40 hours a week. You can just sort of keep yourself open to opportunity because you never know when a company's going to go under, when they're going to pivot, when your boss is going to leave, when things might turn toxic, when you might not get that promotion you were expecting. Like it never hurts to have options. And so it's kind of the I haven't said this in a while, but I always find it, and this doesn't really work anymore because our world is so diverse and everyone has so many different types of relationships. But the funny thing I used to say years ago to people was like, be monogamous in your relationship and polyamorous in your career. Always be looking for people and hitting on people professionally. Like it's weird when you say it like that, but it's like a funny way to look at it, where it's like always be looking for that next job because you never want to get to the point where the layoff happens and you need to start building your network then. You never want to get to a layoff and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I even want to do next. You always want to just have like a little like hand or a little flag in the air saying like, what's out there? And that could be just joining like a nonprofit and working there so that you're like engaged with people who are interested in the same things as you. It could be having something that you do on the side, although we're kind of getting out of that hustle culture world. So I'm not saying go monetize like your knitting or anything like that. Um, and it's just more so being aware of your surroundings and able to move if and when needed. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, something that you've done really well is building the network piece and creating those relationships. If someone hasn't started to do that, where would you suggest someone begin?
So there's 4 types of networking that I think, because everyone's different and everyone has different comfort levels, and it took me a long time to get good at any of these. I was so bad at networking early on. I like legitimately could not get words out in my first meeting, my first informational interview. And the guy's like, well, I got work to do because I like couldn't introduce myself. He was like, why are you here? And I was like, oh, I gave a good elevator pitch in class and my teacher said I should meet you. And he's like, all right, give me the pitch. If I'd forgotten the pitch, and it was brutal. Um, but later on, I ended up reaching out to that guy like 6 years later and we got coffee and it was like, it was a great conversation, but it was a skill I had to develop. But there are 4 different types of networking that we can get good at. And it is always fun to use dating analogies in the job search because it's goofy and hilarious. But if you think about like how can you meet people while dating, and then how can you meet people while networking? They're kind of similar in terms of the outreach and in terms of putting yourself into serendipitous situations for things to happen. If you're just sitting at home playing video games, you're not going to meet people, whether it's professional or personal. So we need to put ourselves into situations where meetings can happen. So one of them is direct outreach. This is what most career coaches talk about. It's like find the person you want to meet, get their email, reach out on LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. That's very similar to like a cold approach where like you're trying to like talk to someone on the street, right? They're a stranger, they don't know who you are, and you have to have a good pickup line to get their attention. And the same with that kind of outreach. I'm emailing someone, they don't know who I am. I need it to be fast, I need it to be quick, I need it to be clear, and I need it to resonate. So that's the most direct way to do it. It takes a while to get comfortable with that if you're not a natural extrovert, but it works really well. Another way to do it, people say like you should meet people to date through your church or through your community center, through whatever the thing that doesn't exist anymore, right? And so that way in a professional setting is like professional organizations or meetup groups or like starting your own meetup group or whatever it might be, going to places where you might see the same people over and over again by volunteering for that organization or being on that board, or getting involved in some way, shape, or form in a group that meets regularly, so you get to see these faces over and over again. The next one after that is online dating, right? So you have profiles that are attractive. So your LinkedIn profile is attractive, your website's attractive, your portfolio is attractive, and you try and attract people to you, whether that's a podcast or whatever it might be. Again, I do not recommend everyone to start a podcast. It is a lot of work. But
Concur.
let's say you have an online profile and you want to reach out to people, and that can be Discord, that can be Slack, that can be LinkedIn, etc. And then finally meetups and in-person events. That's like going to the bar. It's a real crapshoot as to whether or not anyone good will be there, but every once in a while you meet someone great. So those are like the 4 ways to really build your network.
Love that and love those analogies. Yeah. If When you're coaching people, what are some of the internal obstacles that someone might have when engaging with these types of networking?
It's just fear. It's just fear of rejection, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of looking stupid. And the only way through that is to do it. Like the beautiful thing about me going to that networking, to having that it's probably why I became a career coach, but having that very first like awful informational interview where I legitimately could not make words and had to restart my elevator pitch 4 different times. And it was like 10 minutes of a conversation. The great thing about that is 6 years later, I reached out to that person. I was like, you probably don't remember me, but I had a terrible networking meeting with you. And I just wanted to say thanks for the learning experience. Hope you're doing well. And he's like, you're right. I have no idea who you are. Don't remember that happening. Like it is very hard to be remembered. So if you screw up, give it 3 weeks and that person won't remember who you are. I have made a first impression dozens of times with people. So it's kind of nice to be forgettable sometimes, because you get more chances. So I think you just got to do it, and it's exposure therapy. Over time, it gets more and more comfortable, and you realize like they're not paying close enough attention to, obviously we're going to go home and kick ourselves, but we're really our worst critic. Other people are not so bad.
Yeah, because other people are their own worst critic too. But who knows what happens the same day for a person. Yeah. Yeah. All I throw it to do it. Is that like the Nike slogan? Make like Nike and just do it.
Just do it. Just do it. And then if you find you hate doing it, stop doing it. Like find another way to do it. Like when I first started networking, I joined professional organizations and checked people in at the front of the events, because then I met everyone and I met the speaker, and I didn't have to deal with the anxiety of walking up to a stranger and talking to them and making small talk. Eventually I learned how to make small talk, but it was much nicer to just like talk to the speaker before they were being bombarded by 50 other people, so I didn't have to wait in line to talk to the person. Like I used to be terrified to raise my hand to ask questions, and so I'd like psych myself up to do it, and like I would like ask one question at an event just to like build that skill. But all of this stuff is learnable. That's what's nice. Social skills are very much a skill, and we can all learn these skills if we need to.
Sure. Yeah, what you mentioned the MBTI earlier, and it really is that I think people will default to whatever the personality is, whether they're using Myers-Briggs or whatever it is. But it is that it doesn't matter how introvert or extrovert you are, you can learn these skills. And
Exactly.
yeah, nothing is permanent.
Nothing's permanent. And I think probably a good thing for us to kind of hit on as we wrap up is just like, if you don't make the decisions, they will be made for you. So you might as well be proactive about it. If you don't network, then whatever jobs come your way are the jobs that you have. And if you don't like them, well, that's what happens when we just take whatever comes our way, right? If you want something better, you do have to be proactive and realistic, because nothing's perfect. But it is one of those things where, there might be a few paths that you go down that don't work, but there's always a way to make the narrative work looking backwards. So hindsight is 2020. And if you don't know how to tell the story, or if it's too negative, talk to someone, whether your therapist or your coach, and get that story to be more realistic and more positive rather than rooted in insecurities. And just keep pushing, because there are answers out there.
Love that. This has been fun. This has been great.
I love it. This is a really great
Yeah.
conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you. And where can people find you?
If you're curious to learn more, you can find me at careertherapy.com. I'm also on themuse.com if you want to work with me. Um, and, just keep doing what you're doing. You're on the right track.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And until next time, everyone, stay connected.